This is the Crowdcrux Crowdfunding Podcast with Sal Brigman, where we cover everything you need to know to launch a successful crowdfunding campaign. We speak with proven entrepreneurs who've raised money from the crowd and want to teach you how to do the same. Stay tuned because we're about to reveal how to launch your dream project. With your host, Sal Brigman.
This podcast episode is sponsored by Fulfillrite, Kickstarter and crowdfunding reward fulfillment services. I think one of the hardest parts of running a successful crowdfunding campaign is shipping out all of those rewards or all of those perks to your backers, and Fulfillrite helps you do that. You can check them out at fulfillrite.com, fulfillrite.com.
What's up, Crowdfunding Nation? Thank you for joining me on this episode of the podcast. And if it's your first time tuning in, my name is Salvador Brigman. And on this podcast, we talk about crowdfunding. We talk about raising money for new companies using websites like Kickstarter and Indiegogo. And today's episode is an interview style episode where I brought on a man who has co-founded a really cool new equity crowdfunding platform called Fig. And their entire focus is on raising money for games, gaming projects, game developers. You can actually now invest in games that are being developed. Think of it as Kickstarter for equity crowdfunding and with a focus on games. This is Justin Bailey, the co-founder of Fig. We're going to be going into what you need to know if you'd like to launch on his platform, how to raise money, what you should be focused on, how all of the technical stuff with regards to how do you get your money back if you decide to invest in a company. Lots of great, actually, information. And since equity crowdfunding is such a newer thing, I think that this is really just some golden nuggets here. Like, we're learning how this whole new industry is operating and how we should approach it. So you're going to learn a lot of about equity crowdfunding related to gaming in this episode. And this isn't just for the developers in the audience. This is also for, if you grew up loving games, you were a little kid, you like to play games, you can now actually invest in games. It's really cool, guys. So I hope that you enjoy this episode. Before we get into that, I just want to quickly mention that I would appreciate it if you could take a second to rate and subscribe to this podcast on iTunes. If you're on your desktop computer, you can just go to crowdcrux.com/rate on iTunes. And if you're on your smartphone, I guess your iPhone, you can open up the podcast app, hit the search button, and type in crowdfunding or crowdfunding demystified. My podcast will pop up on that page. You can just leave a very quick, 2 to 3 sentence iTunes review. Let me know which episode was your favorite. That's actually a really cool question. I would love to know that. And also, if you have any critical feedback, I am always open to hearing it because I do want to improve this show every single episode. Without further ado, let's get into today's conversation with Justin Bailey, the co-founder of Fig. Justin, welcome to the podcast. I'm excited to speak with you today about your new equity crowdfunding platform, Fig, to talk about game development, how gamers and how investors can use this platform, and to learn a little bit more about equity crowdfunding. And this is actually like a really cool topic for me too, because I do love gaming. I grew up gaming, Xbox, PC, etc. So I'm also kind of geeking out a bit and enjoying talking with you about this. So welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you, Salvador. It's great to be on here.
Could you maybe, in just a snippet, give the viewers a little bit idea of what this platform is and sort of your story? Like, why did you launch this platform, and who can use it?
Okay, great. Yeah, I mean, the platform, so it's specific to video games. It's a crowdfunding platform. We're curated, so we don't just put up every project. We actually help consult with anybody wanting to put a project up, and we actually give them advice. And then we do the traditional rewards where people can actually get the copy of the game and T-shirts and stuff. But what's new for our platform is people can actually invest in the financial returns of the specific game. So that's brand new. And then, my background, I was formerly the CEO of Double Fine. I was there for many of their crowdfunding successes, and actually was in the Massive Chalice video. I had a lot of fun putting that one together with the creator and with Tim. And so, we did that. We were at Double Fine always wanting to remain independent and create control of our properties. And we did everything we could to achieve that. And so, we'd work with publishers in a co-publishing role where they were co-publishing us, and we would finance our games, sometimes self-finance, sometimes through investment groups, and sometimes through crowdfunding.
Okay, did you guys launch several then successful crowdfunding campaigns for Double Fine? I mean, I know they're like a household name, but some people on the podcast might not be familiar.
Yeah, so Double Fine, it's very interesting actually. If you look at the kind of history of crowdfunding, Kickstarter is pretty synonymous with crowdfunding now. But back when Double Fine Adventure launched, and I joined Double Fine a few months after that, so I wasn't there for that campaign. I was there for the filming and everything, the development of that game. But prior to Double Fine coming to Kickstarter, there wasn't really any multi-million-dollar successes. As a matter of fact, most projects on Kickstarter had about, a very successful project was about 1,000 backers and, $100,000, a few $100,000. So when Tim went there with Double Fine Adventure, he, was the fastest. It got to $1 million in a day, ended up with close to 100,000 backers. It was just like unprecedented success. And that was followed very closely by Brian Fargo with Wasteland 2. And, video games have basically, they've served a role of advancing crowdfunding and evolving it even from the start. And so, Brian started doing stretch goals, and, everybody does stretch goals now. And it's interesting to kind of go back through it and see like the first people who really, did these practices and made them commonplace.
That's really cool. That's actually one of the very first few campaigns that also got me interested in the industry, just seeing $1 million success story. And they also launched another campaign, I believe it was like $3 million. So it's incredible that you've been at sort of the birth of crowdfunding here and been giving creators and also giving video game enthusiasts the chance to be a part of your story, which is really cool.
Yeah, so, thanks. I mean, the video games have long since been one of the strongest performing sectors on crowdfunding. It's still the case. It's really cool to see board games are taking off now. They're kind of going where video games were a couple years ago. But during that whole crowdfunding explosion, in video games, Fergus Urquhart came after that, and he was Obsidian, and it was really neat because Tim hit like $3 million with Double Fine Adventure, and then right after that, Wasteland 2 hit, and then also and started doing stretch goals, and then after that, Fergus hit, and his went even over that tally. As far as those like 4 million plus, I don't have the exact number on me, but it's just really interesting. I think if you go look at video game crowdfunding now, those 3 campaigns are actually still in the top 10.
Exactly. They've seen a lot of success. What's really cool to me too is we're at a point in the web's evolution where so many gaming communities have formed, even live gaming, live streaming. The fact that you can be both a player and you can participate in the creation of a game, it now seems like the next logical step is to also own a portion of that game's profit, or if you invest in that company, to own a portion of whatever's created there. It was that sort of like the pain point you're trying to solve here? What actually led to you then deciding, hey, we should do this? Like, was there people in the backer community or et cetera?
Well, I mean, so when I was at Double Fine, I was actually dealing with Fergus and Brian Fargo on a pretty consistent basis. And, we were, a lot of people who wanted to crowdfund their games came to us, and they asked for advice, and they asked, for Tim Schafer, and they asked for help in promoting their games. But then also, as far as just delivering the games that we were creating, we would compare notes and be like, hey, there's some distribution going on here. There's a distribution deal that can help. Maybe we could team up together and get better terms. And so, it just really started to come to me that there's really no support network when people go to crowdfunding. A lot of times there's a little misunderstanding. People are like, oh, I'll go to Indiegogo or go to Kickstarter, and then those platforms will bring their community to me and make me successful. And that's just not what it is. Like, those platforms are designed for people to bring their communities to them. And then once they get their funding, it's done. And so, as you can imagine, with these video games, especially these multi-million-dollar video games, there's a lot more to be done before the game can be delivered. And having more help along the way is necessary and good. So,
yeah, exactly.
But the other thing, sorry.
Oh no, you can go.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing was there's another component to this, which is my lead investor. And I had met him and been talking to him for years. He was the lead investor for Oculus.
Wow.
And so that, became this huge success story and, sold for $2 billion.
That's a great investment. Yeah.
Yeah, it was great. So, and he subsequently went on and he's the lead investor for Cruise, and the VC firm's called Slack. They're called Spark, and they're also invested in Slack and a bunch of other amazing products.
Wow.
But that's, it's been, their strategic advice has been awesome. But, part of his mission, and I love this too, is the idea that fans should be able to participate.
I completely agree with that. That's sort of the whole crux of crowdfunding as well, being both supporting the creator and also being to own a bit of it, and also just benefiting from the rewards that come from it. I want to break down the rest of this interview into first tips that you have or advice, and really just, I guess, insight into how investors can use the platform, et cetera, and then talk a bit more on the game developer side. But before we get to that, I wanted to give the listeners a little bit of idea of some of the success stories that have come out of your platform. So I know there's Psychonauts 2 I see here. There's also, a few other campaigns that are raising money. Could you speak a little bit to that?
Sure. Well, we have 3 concurrent campaigns right now. So Wasteland 3 just passed 3 million. That's really exciting for us. I'd also like, there's smaller campaigns too, and I'm really proud of their achievements. So Make Sale is live on the site right now. It just passed its funding goal. I'm excited about that game. Also, there was Outer Wilds was actually the first game that we launched with, and that was very critically acclaimed. That's actually a newer creator who is just kind of coming on the scene, and we're excited to be associated with him. And then there's there's Jay and Silent Bob, which is actually a licensed property. Justin Woodward is the CEO of that developer. And I thought it was really interesting. We got to work with Kevin Smith. That was a lot of fun. And then, we've had, there's another person whose name is Greg McMartin. He's actually Consortium the Tower. He had a campaign, and he actually had gone on Kickstarter previously and wasn't able to get the full campaign total that he needed to make the game. And he came to us, and we were able to, through awards and investment, make that project successful.
Okay, and I'm confused a little bit. So I know that you can only raise upwards of $1 million under Title III in a 12-month period. So were these rewards-based campaigns or equity campaigns? Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so that is a common misunderstanding. So what happens is the Jobs Act has Title II, Title III, Title IV. So Title II, there's this thing, there was the AngelList no action letter that happened a few years back. And that basically allows accredited investors to participate. And I mean, the best way to describe that is rich people. Like, it's not a test you take. It's just you make a certain amount of money a year, or you have a certain amount of assets, and you're considered accredited. So, there's laws. So Title II pertains to them. Title III and Title IV are both non-accredited investors, which are basically just everybody else, like, myself, right?
Yeah.
The 99%, the rest of society. So those titles, so Title III of that allows you to raise up to $1 million. Title IV, and predominantly people are using Title III to invest in companies. Title IV allows you to raise up to $50 million. So what we've done, and this just happened, this is kind of a first, is we got qualified by the SEC for FIG game shares for Psychonauts 2. And it's the first ever security. It's a brand new security which allows the people to participate in the financial performance of a project. That's just never been done before. And so where you can think of before, where people, they would go and they would you would invest in a company and your money, you'd only get money back like in the Oculus situation but other situations on terminal value.
Yeah.
So
these are these Reg A plus raises then? Regulation A plus?
Yep, that's right.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Sorry, I was just confused in my mind how that was working. Okay, very cool. Sorry for getting into jargon also, listeners. Definitely, actually, if you go back in the podcast episodes, we've talked a lot about Title III, Regulation A+, some of the differences there for the company raising money. But basically, if you're a non-accredited investor, which is majority of the audience, I'd say, you can invest in games on fig.co. So you can go right now and you can check and you can see all these different games. Pretty cool. It's like unprecedented. It's actually... I don't think ever before in the history of the world have people been able to do that. So that's pretty cool. I had to interrupt this podcast episode because I want to introduce you to The Gadget Flow. If you haven't heard of them, their product discovery platform has over 5 million regular monthly visitors. They have over 100,000 subscribers. And if you want access to this massive marketplace, you can go to thegadgetflow.com/submit, and they will help you promote your Kickstarter or Indiegogo crowdfunding campaign. Also, use code CrowdCrux20 for 20% off of all of their offerings. Again, that is thegadgetflow.com/submit.
Yeah, that's cool. It is. We should specify this is very early on, and so you can go like Psychonauts 2 has been qualified, and people can go and buy game shares for Fig game shares for Psychonauts 2. Some of the smaller games, we actually are doing accredited only raises on them. And that's just because right now we're still working with the filing costs with the SEC, and those are pretty high. And so the ones that everybody can participate in now are the bigger campaigns like Wasteland 3 and Psychonauts 2.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Also, as you grow your platform, you might be able to offer that to more people, but especially at the early stages, I think that makes sense. Also, as people are getting new and used to this whole invest in medium, they're going to learn a lot more. So, like, what would be the minimum amount to be able to invest in, say, one of these, like, as you mentioned, Psychonauts 2?
It's a great question. I love the question because there's a couple of things going on for where we set the amount of investment. So Psychonauts 2 has $500 is the minimum you can invest in a game share. So Wasteland 3, actually, it's $1,000 is the minimum. We would like to get that. I would like to get that down to $50. We're working on that. There's some limitations that we have to work with around transaction costs, and that I think we can get there in a couple of years, and that's exciting to me because you could actually see potentially crowdfunding evolving where it's no longer donation based. It's actually whenever people support something years before it becomes like it just becomes the expectation that you can participate in the financial performance of that and get a return, right? Get your money back. And but now, I'm really excited because when we looked at the market, what was happening with crowdfunding in general, in video games I can talk to most specifically because I've done most of the research in this vertical. But the $1,000 and up tiers, like nobody's participating in those anymore. They're just it's just a wasteland. Sorry, not intentional on that pun.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
And by the way, excuse me if I start going into like all these puns of like make sale and.
No, I love puns, man.
I have to stop myself. But anyway, so that's something where I think people, when crowdfunding came along, people got caught up in the excitement of it, and they're like, hey, I just want to be a part of this, and then. They're like you gave $1,000 or even more sometimes, and they got sometimes they'd get dinner or they'd get other experiential rewards, and then those companies would go on to have amazingly successful commercial products, and then people would be like, oh wow, that was really a donation. I didn't get any money from that.
Yeah.
So I think it's appropriate, and we're looking at right now when people invest $1,000 or up. Into Fig that we have these experiences with the creators to go to dinner or have a meetup or do a board game night, those things. I think those are appropriate when that, but then I think it's also appropriate for those people to expect that they can get a financial return.
In terms of that, say I'm putting $500 into Psychonauts 2 or $1,000 into the other campaign. What does that mean exactly? Like, when I get my return on investment? Is this when the company is sold? Is this when the game is sold to a larger production company, or like cash flows? Like, how does that work?
So, wow, awesome question, because that is a huge differentiator for us and why this new security is so exciting, because it does actually track the financial performance of a game. So the way it works is actually the video game developers, they sign a licensing agreement with us. And so that gives us rights to a portion of their revenue. And then we actually tie these shares to that revenue. And that's important for a couple reasons, because like with the developers, like we want them to remain in creative control. We want them to own their IP. And so because I don't know if you've read Creativity Inc. and all, Pixar and how it became Pixar, but we think that having that autonomy is where creators do their best work. And so now the advantage to it, though, is when the project actually, when the game ships and it's commercially available, then we're getting a percentage of that revenue, and that percentage of revenue we're paying the investors from the profits.
Okay, that makes sense to me. It's sort of like almost as though you're investing in a public company and you'd get dividends. With Fig, you would get a distribution whenever the game ships, I imagine.
You actually get a dividend.
A dividend, yeah.
It's actually a dividend, yeah.
Okay, and that would be only when the game ships, or is it like annual, like just out of curiosity there?
Yeah, it's when the game ships. Payments are quarterly.
Okay.
They happen. So, and as most people know, like the majority of games, they do a lot of their sales. Most of the sales are actually done like the first 6 weeks. So,
what I also like about that is I love to play games with my friends, and I know that if I had, an investment in that game, that just like incentivizes me even more to want to get a bunch of my friends playing this game. It sort of is almost like a booster engine where if a new game is coming out, you have all of these people who have a reason to want to share it, not just because they like it, but also because they're going to benefit from it. It's almost like an accelerated growth path in some ways.
Yeah, I mean, you're vested in the financial outcome, which is, I think, awesome. And I think, before people were emotionally invested, and that's awesome. And, I think the financially invested part is, it's not, we haven't gone through this full cycle yet. So, we've raised money for lots of games. We have like a 75% success rate right now. But one of our first games will start to ship Q1 of next year. So when that happens, you'll start to see investors getting a return. And I'm really excited about that, because this is the one thing that we haven't, we're excited about, but we haven't seen play out yet, which is, when people have a financial stake in it, can they help get the word out more and, talk about the game and actually help it sell more, which, helps everybody.
Yeah, very, very well said. I'd like to talk a little bit in terms of the game developers out there. So those people in the audience who are developing games or have a hand in that industry, and they're looking at Fig and they're interested in what you're doing. What advice do you have for them just in general? Like, for example, at what stage should they approach the Fig platform? Is it like early stage? If they're raising $10,000, if they're doing a large raise, can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, I mean, the best thing is to get connected. It was very obvious from the data we looked at when we saw what projects were actually successful on Kickstarter. Those projects had actually, I had seen the majority of them way before they came out on Kickstarter. So, and I knew the people, and I had seen builds of the game, and they were connected in the video game industry, and they had sent their Kickstarter preview code around. And we all had commented on it, and that still happens. So I think the big thing is to get connected in the video game community, to reach out and get kind of, start going to these festivals and stuff and get kind of early feedback on your game, and, get a little further, like for indies. And there's like two sets of advice here. There's indies, which are raising under $100,000, and what we call triple I's, which are like the InXiles and Obsidians and other, independent studios that are very established that are raising, $1 million plus. So for the triple I's, like I do think it's important that they can show gameplay and show some traction that there's some interest before you do a crowdfunding campaign. And then for the triple I's, those things happen. Like there's games that I know of that'll be doing crowdfunding campaigns in 6 months, and I've known about them for like the last 9 months. And so for them, it's a process. It's a very early process to get involved with them, and it evolves.
Okay, for the indie gamers in the audience, one thing I did notice is if these dividends are paid when the game ships, does that mean the amount that you have to raise, say $50,000, is going to result in this game is made completely? Or can you raise money as you're making the game and like do another round of some kind?
Yeah, so there's a few things I love about investment, and this is something I'm very passionate about. Is like, if people are going to raise more than $1 million, I think like in crowdfunding in general, if you raise more than $1 million, you should sell at least one share. And the reason why is because there's a dedication of selling when you participate in investment. There's a certain amount of transparency and accountability that you agree to and that you have to be comfortable with. And so, that's something that I'm really excited about as far as investment. And frankly, I think I got a little off track there.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So what I was asking is, if you are looking to raise money on fig.co and say like Make Sale, they're raising $50,000. They have that $50,000 goal. Is it then expected that with those $50,000, they're going to be completing the game, kind of like Kickstarter? Or can you raise money on fig.co and that 50 grand is maybe going for a specific portion of the game? And
thank you. So that's exactly okay. So where I was going with that was the transparency. You have to be transparent on the budget. So if you actually go and you look at Wasteland 3 or you look at Make Sale, you'll actually see that they're indicating what portion of this budget they're raising on the platform. And I think that's important because I have heard I've seen this happen. I think there's been some abuse with crowdfunding where developers are going and they're literally just raising their marketing funds and they're making it like they're raising their whole budget. And so they're setting it like their budgets are 10 times what they're actually raising, but they're making it. And I think that sets up a bad expectation for consumers because then consumers see this product and they're like, oh my gosh, this person can make that for $10,000. And then they look at, somebody trying to raise $100,000 and they're like, but it's proportional to the budget, right? And that should be a data point that should be available to everybody.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. The other question I have here is if I am in the audience, I'm getting all psyched up. Like, this is a really cool thing, equity crowdfunding. But I'm wondering, hey, I'm a developer. I don't really know how to like market this campaign. Are you going to hold my hand as I launch this? Like, what support services do you offer, if any?
So it's a very important question in that the campaign is ultimately the developer. So we can help act as a catalyst and help augment the word. So for instance, we have we call them their coalition studios, but like Harmonix and Double Fine and Exile and Obsidian. But so for instance, we would coordinate with them, but they're under no obligation whatsoever to help promote any games. But if they do, we'd be like, we can make them aware of that this game is happening, and we do that. More specifically, we run marketing campaigns on Facebook, and we sometimes use Google and Outbrain and stuff to help get exposure for our campaigns, and we do that for all of our campaigns. And that's been hugely successful for us right now, especially because operating in video games, we have a very very positive ROI associated with the marketing segments that we've set up. From the data we've gathered.
Okay, so what I'm taking away here is a lot of the other lessons that we've shared on the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast actually relate to Fig as well. So building an email list, making sure that you're getting involved in the community, making sure you have a landing page, building up your social profiles. These are all things that you must think about consciously before just trying to do an equity crowdfunding raise.
Yeah, 100%. All that stuff helps. And one of the big premise for us is that, these crowdfunding games, this is something we haven't talked much about, but, we got an investment group involved in funding some games for Double Fine. It's called the Indie Fund. They funded two of our games at Double Fine. And I was just looking at different investment groups and how successful they were, and I found out that basically crowdfunded games have a much better success rate. The ones that successfully fund and get over 1,000 backers have a much better success rate of getting discovered when they go on sale. When they're finally published. So that's really exciting for us because I think doing all this pre-work up front for this crowdfunding campaign is a way to get people just even aware that your game exists. And so a portion about it is getting the funds that you'll need to complete the game, but another part of it is about just making people aware, because all the time we get people that are like, hey, that's a really interesting idea. When that comes out, I'll buy that game, but I'm not ready to participate right now. And that's probably the majority of people, actually. It's like the early adopters who want to get involved and like track this whole journey that's happening from this crowd campaign to release.
That's a really great salient point, because with so many games, it's very difficult to stand out for indie creators. There are times where, say, even with Kickstarter, Double Fine, I know about that just because it was a very popular Kickstarter campaign. So if your campaign goes really popular on Fig, it's naturally going to be known about by more people in the gaming community. So it's a great marketing engine. The last question I have for you here, Justin, is what are the costs associated with doing one of these Reggae Plus raises on your platform? So what is your fee, and also what can people expect in terms of the costs?
Yeah, so those costs, the way our structure works is reward-based crowdfunding. We don't take anything of that. That just goes all to the developer. So, you're getting developers who are going through our platform are already getting like 10% more, basically, because, they're not paying that platform fee to Indiegogo or Kickstarter or other platforms they're using. So that's one piece. The second piece is the investment side. Now, the investment side, it does cost us. We have some bona fide costs associated with like registering the security with the SEC. We have lawyer, we have accountant costs. So what we do is we actually collect the investment from selling our Fig game shares during that campaign. And then out of those collections, we take the cost. We take the cost that we incurred to create the filing. Let's say that potentially could be $75,000 to $100,000 basically, and that's why it makes sense only to do this for like $1 million and up. By the way, we have some things in mind to get that cost way down. So we're working very hard to get that way down. But then so that happens, and then the money goes to the developer, and the investment money goes to the developer installments. The reward money goes to the developer straight up front. They just get that if the campaign's done. It actually goes directly to them.
Okay.
So then the investment money, as things are structured right now, goes through in milestone payments to the developer until they actually publish their game.
Okay, so Fig is actually paid in shares then of the company. Did I hear that right?
How do you mean?
Shares of the game. Like, are you being paid in shares of this game that's launching, or is it like a hard fee then that's being paid?
So we actually have all of our upside is aligned with the performance of the game. So we don't make any profit off running campaigns, like none.
Okay,
zero.
Okay.
Matter of fact, we probably lose money because our overhead is not covered in our filing costs. Like our bona fide costs are like the costs that actually that it costs us to run the campaign, like ad dollars spent, like lawyer fees paid, things like that. So all of our upside is like we get a percentage of the title, and we work that in with our licensing agreement. So our licensing agreement gives us a certain percentage of revenue from the developer when the game launches, and that investment's tied to that, and also all of our upside is tied to that too.
Gotcha. That's a very smart way to structure all of that. You guys thought about that a lot, I imagine.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing all of this great information. Where would you like people to check you out, either at fig.co or where would you like people to find you online?
Yeah, absolutely. Just go to our website, fig.co. Very important, it's .co. Fig.com for some reason is down, and that's not us. So
yeah. Good to know.
Yeah.
I'm going to leave you with the last word here. You can speak directly to the podcast listeners in the audience, whether they're game developers or investors. What would you like to share with them, or a word of encouragement, or anything you'd like to share with them? I'll let you have the last word.
Yeah, I'm just really excited that there's more options that creators can tap into to make their projects reality. And so I'm excited to be part of that, and excited for what is in future, what's in store for crowdfunding in general.
Me too. I'm actually really pumped. So we have that in common.
Awesome.
Justin, thank you for coming on the podcast. Look forward to looking at more campaigns that are launching on fig.co, and I will see you next time.
Awesome. Thanks, Salvador.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. Again, my name is Salvador Brigman. I hope you enjoyed today's episode where I spoke with Justin Bailey, the co-founder of the Fig equity crowdfunding platform for games and gaming. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a second to rate and subscribe to this podcast in iTunes. Really helps out the show, and I also love to get your feedback and any sort of advice that you have in your rating and review. So thank you if you decide to do that. This was a really cool episode. I really urge you to check out fig.co. You can go and look at some cool games to invest in. Again, it's like the lowest, I think, $500 to $1,000 minimum at this time. Hopefully that's going to go down in the next few years, because I do think it's cool if you could invest like $50 or $100 in a game. But for now, those are the minimums. So you can go and check that out at fig.co. Thank you for spending a little bit of time with me here today, and I'll see you next time.